Hi, it's the Heretic Chick again. I'm back, whether you like it or not. And today I want to talk about Revelation 1 verse 7 that says, every eye will see him. I don't know if maybe you've been seeing some things in the news or you've been told that there's some things happening right now that are signs that Jesus is going to be coming back really soon. And you're kind of waiting to see him when he returns. So I think we should just look at this from a different angle, and you don't have to agree, but I think it's always good to, look at both sides of an issue before we make up our mind. I used to be waiting for Jesus to come back in the future, riding on a horse on a cloud, and I thought I would see that physically with my eyes, like it says in Revelation 7, every eye will see him. But I actually was a little terrified of that because, let's just read Revelation 1:7. It says, every eye will see him, even those who pierced him, and all the tribes of the earth will wail on account of him. So there was this sense that when Jesus comes back, it's not necessarily going to be good. And, maybe it was 3.5 years or 7 years of this great global tribulation, and I may get raptured out, or I may not, or I don't know. And it was, I always just had a lot of guilt thinking I should be wanting this to happen, but I was scared for it to happen. So then I felt like I didn't have faith. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe you never felt that way. And I can see that my animals are going to be making an appearance again in this video. So hold on. I have to yell at my dog and tell her to not bark. Oh, this is pretty funny. I don't know if you can see back there, but the big dog's on the couch with his toy. And the little dog, she has this squirrel. It's her favorite squirrel toy, and she's dropped it on the big dog. So it's right on top of him. I'm sure we're gonna get interrupted. And there's a kitten running around in here. So we'll see how it goes. But anyway, back to Revelation 1:7. So I kind of covered some of this in my last video, which was actually kind of a farce, kind of a little joke I played on you. So I hope you're not angry with me, but girls gotta have a little fun, right? So can't take ourselves too seriously. All right, but let's take a little different look at Revelation 1:7 when it says, every eye will see him. Does that really mean physically with these two eyes, I'm going to see Jesus? I live in Indiana, and from what I've been told, he's coming back on the Mount of Olives. I've been to the Mount of Olives, and it was like an 11-hour plane ride to get there. And I can tell you that from the plains of Indiana, where there are no mountains, there's absolutely no way that I'm going to be able to see all the way to Jerusalem. So how does this work? Someone in my comments actually pointed out that, because I jokingly said, oh, well, we'll see him on TV or the internet. And he said, how could we even trust that? Think about it. If you saw Jesus on TV landing on the Mount of Olives, with AI, with all this computer graphics, how could you even trust that and know that it's real? What if there's something else going on here? I want to read to you a little bit of John 9. I just love this passage so much. It's one of my favorite passages. It's the story of the man born blind. And we're not going to read the whole thing because it's kind of long. But so basically, Jesus heals the man who's blind. And he does it on the Sabbath. And now the Jews, the Pharisees, are really angry and jealous because everybody's following Jesus and saying how great he is. And, they don't like that because they want everyone to say how great they are. And so this is starting in verse 18. It says, the Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight, and they asked them, Is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but how he now sees, we don't know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. I mean, wow, isn't that crazy? Even before Jesus' death and resurrection, people were already getting kicked out of the club. People were already being persecuted for following Jesus. And being kicked out of the synagogue, I mean, it's not like you getting kicked out of your church today. I mean, the synagogue was their community, their way of life. I mean, it was not just a social thing or a spiritual thing. It was everything to them. Social, economic, spiritual, political. It was their life. Getting kicked out of the synagogue was a huge deal. So they didn't want to. And so then they find the man and they actually ask him, and they say, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And he answered them, "I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" And they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses." That's interesting. Isn't that interesting? They say, "We follow Moses, Old Covenant, but you, man who is blind and now see, you follow Christ." I never thought about that before. Okay. "We know God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, "Why, this is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." Ooh, I feel like he's probably going to get in trouble for saying that. They answered him, "You were born in utter sin, and you would teach us?" And it says next, and they cast him out. They cast him out. And then Jesus heard that he had been cast out. And he found him and he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And he answered, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" And Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you." And he said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped him. And Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things, and they said to him, "Are we also blind?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say, 'We see,' your guilt remains." So we have something so interesting going on in this passage of the man born blind. Yes, we have this like physical sight, physical lack of sight, blindness, and he heals it, and now he can see with his physical eyes. But then as Jesus is explaining this to the Pharisees, he's taking this physical thing and he's turning it on his head and he's making it a spiritual thing. You are blind, right? If you say that you see, but you can't, right? And so he's no longer talking about physical sight. It reminds me of when Jesus calls the Pharisees blind guides. Blind guides. I mean, they weren't physically blind. They had eyes that could see, but he called them blind guides. They weren't actually physically leading anyone anywhere either, if you think about it. I mean, they weren't physically guiding people. They were their spiritual leaders. They were supposed to be shepherding them, not physically, but spiritually. And so blindness is a spiritual blindness in that context. So I guess what I'm saying is it possible that in Revelation 1:7, when it says every eye will see him, could this be talking about the eyes of our heart, right? Our inner eye, the eyes of understanding. Let's think about some more passages. 2 Corinthians 4:18, it says, what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. John 4, I love John 4. It's the woman at the well. And there's just so much there. Remember, the woman, she's starting to be amazed by Jesus because he knows things about her. And she says, okay, well, we believe we need to worship at this mountain in Samaria, but you Jews say we have to worship at the mountain in Jerusalem. Which is it? And Jesus says to her, the time is coming, and now is, when you're not going to worship me on this mountain here or the mountain in Jerusalem, but my worshipers will worship me in spirit and in truth, for God is spirit, and he's longing for people to worship him in spirit. So yet again, we have this spiritual nature of the kingdom. So if the point being there, if God is spirit and Jesus is God, then how are we going to see him riding into town? You know? 1 Timothy 1:17 says that God is invisible. So these are just some examples. I mean, I also think of Nicodemus. Remember Nicodemus, he comes to Jesus at night because he's afraid. Just like the parents of the man born blind, he was a leader. He was a Jewish leader. He didn't want to get kicked out of the club. So he comes at night, and Jesus tells him this whole thing about, you're going to have to be born again. And Nicodemus is totally flummoxed. And what are you talking about? How can I enter into my mother's womb and be born again? And he says, no, you're not getting it. That I'm not talking about physically, you know. Jesus said the kingdom does not come with observation. Think about that. Oh, here's my little distraction again. Hi, kitty. How are you? Jesus said the kingdom does not come with observation. If Jesus is riding into town to usher in the kingdom, how are we going to see it with our eyes if Jesus said you can't observe it? He said it's within you. So how would that even work? Is Jesus going to ride physically inside of us and we're going to see him come into us? The kingdom is within us? No. He's talking about, or I'm gonna argue that it's possible here in Revelation that he's talking about we're going to see him with the eyes of understanding. In fact, I have this friend, and we have a Bible study together. She's great. And I tell her some of these things. And sometimes her husband comes in while we're talking about stuff, and he likes to argue with me, I guess I would say, in a friendly way. But he brought up this verse, and that's another reason why we're studying this verse is, you know, if I were to say Jesus already came back, it's not in our future, I feel like this is probably the number one verse that people, you know, off the top of their head, they just say it. Well, that can't be true because every eye will see him. And so this friend, her husband, said that to me, and I said to him, I see your point. And he just was like, yeah. And I had to keep saying, I see your point. And then it sunk in after a few times. But there are different ways to see things, okay? And then let's just think about the context of this verse. Remember, if we go, oh, kitty. If we go to Revelation chapter 1, let's look at it again. I mean, context is king, right? Revelation chapter 1, verse 1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his servants the things that must soon take place. So, first verse of Revelation has this big fat time stamp that says these things are going to happen soon, okay? but yet we say soon doesn't mean soon, right? We're not going to take soon literally, but we're going to see him literally, even though there's a plethora of examples in the New Testament of seeing not having anything to do with eyes, okay? But he says, blessed are those who hear and keep what is written in this book, for the time is near. So right there, it's soon and it's near, just in the first couple verses, okay? But even when we get down to verse 7, it says, even those who pierced him, every eye will see him, even those who pierced him. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think there's anyone 2,000 years old right now that was there when Jesus was pierced. So how are the people that pierced him going to see him? You know, and then people say, oh, well, they'll be resurrected and then they'll see him. Okay, but then we're back to, what about the people in Indiana? You know, what about people that don't have eyes? What about people that are blind? Maybe, just maybe, this isn't about physical sight. He said it was going to be soon. He said it was near. He said the people who pierced him were going to see it, okay? And then he said, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn. I don't know if you've watched any of my other videos, but I point out in some of those that that word earth oftentimes refers to the land of Israel. It's the Greek word G-E. It doesn't mean necessarily, and usually not, I would argue, in the New Testament, the entire world. It meant the land of Israel. And contextually, that makes sense because the tribes of the earth. Well, do we know anything about the land of Israel? Were there tribes? Yes. I don't think he's talking here about the tribes in the Amazon. Remember, let's just take everything into account here contextually. It's going to be soon. It's near. The tribes of the earth are going to see it, even those who pierced him. Remember what Jesus said. The kitten just jumped on my Bible and fell down. Remember Jesus before Caiaphas? And Caiaphas says to him, tell us, are you the Messiah, the Son of God? And Jesus said, it is as you say, and you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds with power. And he said that to Caiaphas and to the religious leaders that were standing there. They're not alive now, but some of them were alive 40 years later in 70 AD when God came in judgment on Jerusalem. So, you know, at least I think we've established that it could be, it's possible. There's a chance that we shouldn't interpret every eye will see him literally. We also have to think about the fact that this book of Revelation was written to, yeah, I heard you. That's right. The seven churches that existed 2,000 years ago. So context. I think in one of the comments, someone was debating with me in the comments, and I can't say this is original to me. I heard it somewhere, but, you know, paraphrased, it was kind of an example like this. You know, I said, Revelation wasn't written to us. And then people say, like, how could you say that? The Bible was written to us. And I'm saying, no, we're just reading someone else's mail. And we have to think about audience relevance. And I said, it would be like if I was cleaning out my grandma's drawer and I found a church bulletin from like 1965, and it said, join us this afternoon at 4 p.m. for the church picnic. We're gonna have a potluck dinner. And I showed up at the park with my beef and noodles, and nobody's there. And I'm like, what's going on? Why isn't anybody here? Well, I've completely ignored who that was written to, Same thing with Revelation. It was written to the 7 churches. What would they have made of this? It says, these things are going to happen soon. They're near. Every eye will see him, even those who pierced him. All the tribes, tribes, Israel, will mourn. So there's a lot of contextual evidence there that I think we've been omitting in our futurist paradigm. So, but in my last video, we did talk about blind, eyes that can see but aren't actually seeing, like the Pharisees being blind guides. But we didn't talk a lot about coming on the clouds. It says you're going to see him. He's coming on the clouds, and every eye will see him. So I wanted to hit a little bit of that. Okay, Isaiah 19:1 talks about, I mentioned this one already, Jesus coming on the clouds, which wasn't meant to be taken literally. It was in judgment. And Psalm 104:3 says he makes the clouds his chariot. So does anyone think that we should take that literally? He makes the clouds his chariot. Is he literally sitting in a puffy cloud like Grumpy Bear? I don't know if you're familiar with the Care Bears, but I mean, if he's coming in judgment on Jerusalem or the world, then I guess he'd have to be Grumpy Bear. And he's in his little cloud chariot. No, it's not literal. Let's look at a couple other ones. Nahum 1:3. Oh boy. Now we've got to find Nahum in the Bible. Sorry, I'm old school. Like people have this up on their computer, but I don't know how to do that. So Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Jonah, Micah, Nahum. Oh, Nahum. Nahum 1, verse 3. Okay. It says, his way, speaking of the Lord, his way is in whirlwind and storm, and the clouds are the dust of his feet. His way is in whirlwind and storm. And this, it says, the title of the section is God's wrath against Nineveh. So God was going to bring a judgment on Nineveh. It says, the Lord is avenging and wrathful. He takes vengeance on his adversaries. His way is in the whirlwind and the storm. The clouds are the dust of his feet. Okay, so Revelation says he's coming on the clouds. Every eye will see him. Do we have to take that literally? If it's not literal in the Old Testament, why do we force things to be literal in the New Testament? Ezekiel 30, verse 3. All right. Let's see if we can find that. Ezekiel 30. Okay. The day of the Lord is near. It will be a day of clouds. I mean, look at it. It's a cloudy day right now. I mean, what kind of a sign would that be? It's like, I'm prophesying it's going to be cloudy when he comes. I mean, the odds are pretty good in Indiana for the next 6 months that it's going to be cloudy, because in Indiana, it's cloudy from November until April. And the sun starts to come out in May. It's just like 6 months of gloom. So is that what he's talking about here? No, I don't think so. In fact, it says a lament for Egypt. This is a judgment on Egypt. The day of the Lord, it will be a day of clouds, a time of doom for the nations. Okay? This is a metaphor. Coming on the clouds is a metaphor for judgment of a nation. Let's look at one more. This is Joel 2, 1-2. Okay, now we've got to find Joel. Oh, that was fast. Turned right to it. Okay, this is also about the day of the Lord. We had this song that we used to always sing that was called The Day of the Lord. It was like, there's strength in the day of the Lord. There's power hope in the day of the Lord. It was like a happy song, and then it would say, I don't want to sing it, but it's like coming out as a song, because I don't know, it's in my head, but I really don't want to sing in front of you guys. And it says, blessed is he who comes in the day of the Lord. And it's this really happy, peppy song that makes you think you want the day of the Lord. But this says, blow a trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble. Oh, wow. Does this remind you of anything? What happened in Revelation 1:7? All the tribes of the earth will wail or mourn. Now we have all the inhabitants of the land trembling. The land, remember, gi can mean land, not earth. For the day of the Lord is coming, it is near. Now that's interesting, because the book of Revelation said it was near. A day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Like blackness, there is spread upon the mountains a great and powerful people. So now it's saying it's going to be dark and black, but it's not meaning physical or literal. It tells you right there, it's powerful people. This is an army, okay? This is language to talk about the coming army. When the day of the Lord comes, it's going to be clouds and darkness, okay? It's not happy, happy, joy, joy. So I'm sorry, I don't want to ruin your day. But the good news is, I think this already happened, okay? The day of the Lord already happened. And the day of the Lord was Jesus coming in judgment on Jerusalem. And in fact, I was just looking over Joel 2. Okay, you guys need to not take my word for any of this. You need to go get your Bibles and look some of these passages up, and especially Joel. Like, not just Joel chapter 2, but just read the whole book. It's really short. There's only a few chapters, but it talks about the day of the Lord. I mean, it's all about the day of the Lord. And let's see what happens in the day of the Lord. There's a trumpet. And actually, it's quoted in Acts 2. Remember when at Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit comes and they can speak in all these tongues, and they're like, oh, you're drunk. And Peter's like, no, we're not drunk. This is the fulfillment of what Joel said in Joel chapter 2. It shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. So this book of Joel was being fulfilled in the first century. That's what Peter said. He said, this is that, okay? This pouring out of the Spirit is exactly what Joel prophesied. And it says it's before, this is Joel chapter 2, verse 31, the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes, okay? And that is the same time when they're going to be at Zion, the holy mountain. This is chapter 3, verse 17. Remember, the book of Hebrews says, you have come to Mount Zion. That was 2,000 years ago. They came to Mount Zion. So there's a lot going on in the book of Joel, but if you read it, read to the very end, and the last verse says, I will avenge their blood. Blood I have not avenged, for the Lord dwells in Zion. So this day of the Lord that was coming, which wasn't going to be pretty, okay? And it's a day of clouds, coming on the clouds, just like Revelation. It was going to be in vindication or vengeance of the martyrs, okay? To avenge the martyrs' blood. Now remember, I'm kind of jumping around, so hang with me. This is going to be my last point, okay? He's coming on the clouds. This is what Joel is all about. The day of the Lord is coming. He's coming on the clouds. It's going to be gloom and thick darkness. And the point of it is going to be, one of the points is to avenge the martyrs. But Matthew 23, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and he tells them that all the blood of all the martyrs was going to come on them in, quote, this generation. 2,000 years ago. Okay? The blood of the martyrs was going to be avenged in this generation. And there's no, I don't think, I mean, you can read all the commentaries. Let me know if I'm wrong. And there's some that disagree. But in Matthew 23, when Jesus says that the blood of the martyrs is going to be avenged in this generation, everybody agrees that that happened 40 years later in the destruction of Jerusalem. That was their vengeance. It was the punishment of the unbelieving Jews, okay? This culmination of the fulfilling of the blood of the martyrs poured out on them in the Jewish war with Rome, the complete and utter destruction, devastation of Jerusalem. That happened 2,000 years ago. Everybody agrees, okay? But Joel says that is the day of the Lord, okay? It's also the time of the New Jerusalem and the new heaven and the new earth. It's the time of the pouring out of the Holy Spirit, which Peter said was in the first century. So read the book of Joel and maybe read the last verse first. Think about the fact that Jesus said that that was going to happen in the first century, okay? And maybe think about the fact that when Jesus said, every eye will see him, maybe that's not meant to be taken literally. Maybe it's not literal clouds. But maybe we should really think a little more literally about what he meant when he said soon and near. You know? And hey, that's good news. This is really good news because this isn't in our future. If you believe what I'm telling you, you don't have to worry about it in your future. Okay? It's over. Isn't that great? I think that would be a good song. You know, no more gloom and doom. It's over. So, okay. If you're still with me, I had a couple of things I wanted to talk about, but you know, I didn't want all the people who are just like clicking on this for the first time or clickbait or whatever. I didn't want them to have to listen to me, but okay, subscribers. I have a lot more subscribers. My daughter came home, I think it was last week, and I had 799 subscribers. And I said to her, I'm like, wow, I only need one more and I have 800. And she said she hadn't even subscribed to my channel and she wouldn't. So I had to wait, but someone else did. So now I don't even know, but I think maybe I have like 900 now. So that's kind of crazy. And I don't know. I don't want to think about that too much, but that's really cool. And I have a lot of subscribers who I think aren't necessarily even Christians or definitely not preterists. So maybe that's because I trick them. You know, my last video, I'm really sorry if I tricked you guys. You know, if I made you think that all of a sudden I wasn't a preterist. So I don't know. I'm sorry. Forgive me, but I'm kind of a tease. So anyway, but the cool thing about that is I do think it kind of brings in a wider audience. And I don't want to be part of an echo chamber, just like, you know, you go to a futurist church and everybody there wants to just talk about what they believe and they don't want to engage in a real conversation about a different perspective. I mean, I don't want to be like that. I like the conversations. So in fact, I had a nice conversation with someone in the comment section just yesterday, and I think he's atheist or agnostic or something, but you know, I enjoy the dialogue. So anyway, everybody's welcome. Oh, okay. So I've told you a little bit about my book club and my book club that I'm in with my girlfriends. And so we are reading Wars and Rumors of Wars. I think it would be really fun if we all did that together. If you're still here, then maybe you're like, oh, my husband came home. Hey babe, I'm making a video. You're gonna be in it again. But anyway, I thought it'd be really cool if you guys wanted to do it along with me. So here's the book, Wars and Rumors of Wars by Gary DeMar. And it says what Jesus really said about the end of the age, earthquakes, a great tribulation, signs in the heavens, and his coming. This book, it's not even a full preterist book. Okay, this book is post-millennial, I think you'd call it, or partial preterist or whatever. It's really a good book. And this book was a book that helped me a lot. I can't even remember what my exact position was at the time that I read it, but I just remember this really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And so no matter where you are, what you think, even if you don't believe in the Bible, I think this might be a great book. And you know, it's funny, I was just reading it today, and it was giving all these quotes of people who don't believe in the Bible. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, it talked about, this is a quote from Bertrand Russell, famous atheist. And he said, I am concerned with Christ as he appears in the gospel narrative as it stands. And there one does find some things that do not seem to be very wise. For one thing, he certainly thought that his second coming would occur in clouds of glory before the death of all the people who were living at that time. There are a great many texts that prove that, and there are a lot of places where it is quite clear that he believed his coming would happen during the lifetime of many then living. That was the belief of his earlier followers, and it was the basis of a good deal of his moral teaching. So this is famous atheist Bertrand Russell from his book, Why I Am Not a Christian. I mean, he wrote a book, Why I'm Not a Christian, and one of his primary reasons was because Jesus said he was coming back within the lifetime of his disciples in the first century, and he didn't do it, so he's a false prophet. Okay? I mean, this is what I'm saying. We need to defend this. And then he gives the quote from C.S. Lewis. I don't know if you've heard this. I've probably mentioned it in some of my other videos, but this is what C.S. Lewis said the skeptics were saying. Say what you like, we shall be told the apocalyptic beliefs of the first Christians have been proved to be false. It is clear from the New Testament that they all expected the second coming in their own lifetime, and worse still, they had a reason, and one which you will find very embarrassing. Their master had told them so. He shared and indeed created their delusion. He said in so many words, this generation will not pass away till all these things be done. And he was wrong. He clearly knew no more about the end of the world than anyone else. It certainly is the most embarrassing verse in the Bible. I mean, that's C.S. Lewis, okay? So, I don't know. I think this will be a really great book. And so maybe get this book and we can talk about it together. You know, maybe we'll do like a couple chapters a week or something. So it's Wars and Rumors of Wars by Gary DeMar. And I don't know if you can get it on Amazon, or it might be a little expensive there. I can't remember if they even had it, but I got it directly from American Vision. So just go to American Vision, and it was like, it might have been $20, between $10 and $20 with shipping, you know. So, or maybe you can get it from the library or something, I don't know. But yeah, we'll be talking about it together, and it should be interesting. And then we can see what the girls in my book club have to think about it. So that should be really interesting. Okay, have a good day.